Page 201 of Armageddon Now, in the last chapter, Jerusalem What Now, he says the Six-Day War also stimulated a revival of the premillenarians' antipathy toward the Arabs. The month after the war, William Ward Eyre claimed that the Arabs were proof of biblical inspiration. The Bible had said of Ishmael, "His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him." Eyre commented, this had been proved correct because the Arabs had lived in continual warfare with the rest of the world. One chapter in William M. Smith's Israeli-Arab conflict in the Bible was titled "The Perpetual Hatred of the Arabs." Speaking of the Arab, Smith said, "He cannot be said to be distinguished for amiability and love of peace. He personally shall be the aggressor against all others." End of quote. God's judgment against Mount Seir in Ezekiel 35 was applied to the Arabs. And Mount Seir is a virtual synonym for the land of Edom at the north end of the Gulf of Aqaba to the southeast of Israel. God's judgment against Mount Seir in Ezekiel was applied to the Arabs. This particular paragraph regarding Edom in chapter 35 of Ezekiel relates particularly to the events occurring at the end of this age, and what we have seen in the June of 1967 only adds evidence to the truthfulness of this ancient prophecy. Biola's Charles L. Feinberg spoke of the perpetual belligerency of the Arabs and concluded, God will, in his own good time, cast out the sons of Ishmael, despite all their devising and intrigues, and will settle the sons of Isaac. A Christian Life article in essence denied the legitimacy of the Arabs' very existence, tracing the problem back to Ishmael's father, Abraham, and Abraham's wife, Sarah. Had the pair put their trust in God, the article said, to solve their problem, instead of mixing blood with an Egyptian, Ishmael would never have been born. Today there would be no controversial birthright over which to shed streams of human blood. Such wistful musing was characteristic of premillenarian thinking. It had no relation to reality, and even if accepted as an explanation of the problem, made no suggestion toward a solution. Russian involvement in supplying arms to the Arabs before and after the Six-Day War led to increased speculation of the future relationship of Russia and the Arabs as Armageddon approached. According to the late great planet Earth, the Arabs would ally with all the Muslim nations of Africa and with Russia's Great Northern Confederacy against Israel. Current events in the Middle East had supposedly prepared the stage for Egypt's last great act. But Egypt was to be double-crossed by the Russians and would herself, along with the African nations, fall subject to Russia. It would all turn out in the end, however, for Egypt in her extremity would turn to Christ for salvation. They're probably alluding there to Isaiah's prophecy about the highway between Iraq and Egypt going through, of course, Israel. Al Lindsey concluded his chapter on the Arabs, Sheik to Sheik, it was entitled, with the usual sense of premillenarian urgency. Quote, "It's happening. God is putting it all together. God may have his meaning for the now generation, which will have a greater effect on mankind than anything since Genesis." End of quote. The Jesus freaks and Jesus people of the early 1970s may have taken their name from Christianity's founder, but Al Lindsey became their high prophet. Yeah, I do know people who were personally converted through the late great planet Earth. Another facet to the Arab problem was being taught by radio evangelist C.M. Ward of Revival Time. According to Ward, the moment in history seemed to be approaching when there would be an Arab-Israeli reconciliation. Quote, "Russia is going to discover that Jacob and Esau are twin brothers. There is a limit to how much misunderstanding and strife can be promoted between them." End of quote. He predicted that Suez and Sinai would be negotiated because there were promises to Esau as well as to Jacob, but he did not claim to see any current signs of reconciliation. Put in a link to the birth of Ishmael, the story of Genesis 16, where the plan of Abram and Sarai, who have not yet been renamed, we notice. Abram and Sarai make a plan to bring forth the predicted seed that had been promised back in Genesis chapter 12. And that plan goes awry. Ishmael becomes the father not only of the Arab nation, such as it is, but also of Islam. So Ishmael, Isaac, and the perpetual enmity. This is our commentary on Genesis chapter 16. See you next time.